Worker Councils by Anton Pannekoek. In its revolutionary struggles, the working class needs organization. When the great masses have to act as a unit, a mechanism is needed for understanding and discussion, for making and issuing of decisions, and for the proclaiming of actions and aims. This does not mean, of course, that the great actions and universal strikes are carried out with soldier-like discipline after the decision of a central board. Such cases will occur, it is true, but more often, through their eager fighting spirit, their solidarity and passion, masses will break out in strikes to help their comrades, or the protest against some capitalist atrocity with no general plan. Then such a strike will spread like prairie fire all over the country. In the first Russian Revolution, the strike waves went up and down. Often the most successful were those that had not been decided in advance, while the strikes that had been proclaimed by central committees often failed. The strikers, once they are fighting, want mutual contact and to understand in order to unite in organized force. Here, a difficulty presents itself. Without strong organization, without joining forces and binding their will into one solid body, without uniting their action in one common deed, they cannot win against the strong organization of capitalist power. But when hundreds and millions of workers are united in one body, this can only be managed by functionaries acting as representatives of the members. And we have seen that these officials become masters of the organization, with interests different from the revolutionary interests of the workers. How can the working class, in revolutionary fights, unite its force into one big organization without falling into a pit of officialdom? The answer is given by putting another question. If all that the workers do is pay their fees and obey when their leaders order them in or out, are they themselves then really fighting for their freedom? Fighting for freedom is not letting your leaders think for you and decide, and following obediently behind them, or from time to time scolding them. Fighting for freedom is partaking in the full of one's capacity, thinking and deciding for oneself, taking all the responsibilities as self-relying individuals amongst equal comrades. It is true to think for oneself, to think out what is true and right with the head dulled by fatigue is the hardest and most difficult task. It is much harder than to pay and to obey. But it is the one way to freedom. To be liberated by others whose leadership is the essential part of the liberation means the getting of new masters instead of old ones. Freedom, the goal of the workers, means that they are able, man for man, to manage the world, to use and deal with the treasures of the earth, so as to make a happy home for all. How can they ensure this if they are not able to conquer and defend this themselves? The proletarian revolution is not simply a vanquishing of capitalist power. It is the rise of the whole working people out of dependence and ignorance into independence and clear consciousness of how to make their life. True organization, as the workers need it in revolution, implies that everyone takes part in it, body and soul and brains, that everyone take part in leadership as well in action, has to think out, to decide and to perform to the full of his capacities. Such an organization is a body of self-determining people. There is no place for professional leaders. Certainly there is obeying. Everyone has to follow the decisions which he himself has taken part in making, but the full power always rests with the workers themselves. Can such a form of organization be realized? What must be its structure? Is it necessary to construct it or think it out? History has always produced it. It sprang into life out of the practice of the class struggle. Its prototype, its first trace is found in strike committees. In a big strike, all the workers cannot assemble into one big meeting. They choose delegates to act as a committee. Such a committee is only the executive organ of the strikers. It is continually in touch with them and has to carry out the decisions of the strikers. Each delegate at every moment can be replaced by others. Such a committee never becomes an independent power. In such a way, a common action as one body can be secured. And yet the workers have all decisions in their own hands. Usually in strikes, the uppermost lead is taken out of the hands of these committees by the trade unions and their leaders. In the Russian Revolution, when the strikes broke out irregularly in the factories, the strikers chose delegates which, for the whole town or for an industry or railway across the whole state or province assembled to bring unity into the fight. They had at once to discuss political matters and to assume political functions because strikes were directed against Tsarism. They were called Soviets, councils. In these Soviets, all the details of the situation, all the workers' interests, all political events were discussed. The delegates went out to and fro continually between the assembly and their factories. In the factories and shops, the workers, in general meetings, discussed all the same matters, took their decisions, and often sent new delegates. Able socialists were appointed as secretaries to give advice based on their wider knowledge. Often these Soviets had to act as political powers, as a kind of primitive government when the Tsar's power was paralyzed, when officials and officers did not know what to do and let the field to them. Thus, these Soviets became the permanent center of the revolution. They were constituted by delegates of all factors, striking or working. They could not think of becoming an independent power. The members were often changed, and sometimes a whole Soviet was arrested and had to be replaced by new delegates. Moreover, they knew that all their force was rooted in the workers' will to strike and not to strike. Often their calls were not followed when they did not concur with the workers' instinctive feelings of power or weakness, of passion or prudence. So the Soviet system proved to be an appropriate form of organization for a revolutionary working class. In 1917, it was at once adopted in Russia, and everywhere workers and soldiers Soviets came into being and were the driving force of the revolution. This complementary proof was given in Germany. In 1918, after the breakdown of the military power, workers' and soldiers' councils in imitation of Russia were founded. But the German workers, educated in party and union discipline, full of social democratic ideas of republic and reform as the next political aims, chose their party and union officials as delegates in these councils. When fighting and acting themselves, they acted and fought in the right way. But from lack of self-confidence, they chose leaders filled with capitalist ideas, and these were always spoilt matters. It is natural that the Council Congress then resolved to abdicate for a new parliament to be chosen as soon as possible. Here, it became evident that the council system is the appropriate form of organization only for a revolutionary working class. If the workers do not intend to go on with the revolution, they have no use for Soviets. If the workers are not far enough advanced yet to see the way of revolution, they are satisfied with their leaders doing all the work of speechifying and mediating and bargaining for reforms within capitalism. Then parliaments and party and union congresses, called worker parliaments because they work on the same principle, are all they need. If, however, they fight with all their energy for revolution, if, with the intense eagerness and passion, they take part in every event, if they think over and decide for themselves all details of fighting because they have to do the fighting, then workers' councils are the organization they need. This implies that worker councils cannot be formed by revolutionary groups. Such groups can only propagate the idea by explaining to their fellow workers the necessity of council organization. When the working class, as a self-determining power, fights for freedom, councils are the form of organization only for fighting masses, for the working class as a whole, not for revolutionary groups. They originate and grow up along with the first action of revolutionary character. With the development of revolution, their importance and their function increase. At first, they might appear as simple strike committees in opposition to the labor leaders. When the strikes go beyond the intentions of their leaders and rebel against unions and their leaders. In a universal strike, the function of these committees are enlarged. Now, delegates of all the factories and plants have to discuss and decide about all the conditions of the fight. They will try to regulate into consciously devised actions all the fighting power of the workers. They must see how they will react upon the government's measures, the doings of soldiers or capitalist gangs. By means of the very strike action, the actual decisions are made by the workers themselves. In the councils, the opinions, the will, the readiness, the hesitation, or the eagerness, the energy, and all the obstacles of the masses concentrate and combine into a common line of action. They are symbols, the exponents of workers' power. But at the same time, they are the spokesmen who can be replaced at any moment. At one time, they are outlaws of the capitalist world. At the next, they have to deal as equal parties with the high functionaries of government. When the revolution develops to such a point to such power that state power is seriously affected, then the worker councils have to assume political functions. In a political revolution, this is their first and chief function. They are the central bodies of the workers' power. They have to take all measures to weaken and defeat the adversary. Like a power at war, they have to stand guard over the whole country, controlling the efforts of the capitalist class to collect and restore their forces and to subdue the workers. They have to look after a number of public affairs, which otherwise were state affairs: public health, public security, and the uninterrupted course of social life. They have to take care of production itself, the most important and difficult task and concern of the working class in revolution. A social revolution in history never began as a simple change of political rulers, who then, after having acquired power, carried out the necessary social changes by means of new laws. Already before and during the fight, the rising class built up its new social organs as new sprouting branches within the dead husk of the former organism. In the French Revolution, the new capitalist class, the citizens, the businessmen, the artisans, built up each town and village in their communal boards. The renewed courts of justice, illegal at the time, usurping only the functions of the powerless functionaries of the royalty. While their delegates in Paris discussed and made a new constitution, the actual constitution was made all over the country by the citizens holding their political meetings, building up their political organs, afterwards legalized by law. In the same way, during the proletarian revolution, the new rising class creates its new form of organization, which step by step in process of revolution supersede the old state organization. The worker councils, as a new form of political organization, take the place of parliamentism, the political form of capitalist rule. Parliamentary democracy is considered by capitalist theorists, as well as by social democrats, as the perfect democracy, conform to its justice and equality. In reality, it is only a disguise for capitalist domination and contrary to justice and equality. It is the council system that is the true workers' democracy. Parliamentary democracy is a foul democracy. The people are allowed to vote once in 4 or 5 years to choose their delegates. Woe to them if they do not choose the white right man. Only at the polls the voters can exert their power. Thereafter, they are powerless. The chosen delegates are now the rulers of the people. They make laws and constitute governments, and the people have to obey, usually by election mechanism. Only the big capitalist parties with their powerful apparatus, with the papers, their noisy advertising have a chance to win. Real trustees of discontented groups seldom have the chance to win a few seats. In the Soviet system, each delegate can be repealed at each moment. Not only do the workers continuously remain in touch with the delegate, discussing and deciding for themselves, but the delegate is only a temporary messenger to the council assemblies. Capitalist politicians denounce this characterless role of the delegate, and that he may have to speak against his personal opinion. They forgot that just because there are no fixed delegates, only those who will be sent whose opinions conform to those of the workers. The principle of parliamentary representation is that the delegate in parliament shall act and vote according to his own conscience and conviction. If some question, he should ask the opinion of the voters. It is only due to his own prudence, not the people, but he on his own responsibility has to decide. The principle of the Soviet system is just the reverse. The delegates only express the opinion of the workers. In the election for parliament, the citizens are grouped according to voting districts and countries, that is to say, according to their dwelling place. Persons of different trades or classes have nothing in common. Accidentally living near one another are combined into an artificial group which has to be represented by one delegate. In the councils, the workers are represented by their natural groups according to factories, shops, and plants. The workers of one factory or one big plant form a unit of production. They belong together by their collective work. In revolutionary epochs, they are in immediate contact to interchange opinions. They live under the same conditions and have the same interests. They must act together. The factory is the unit in which a strike has to strike or to work, and its workers must decide what they collectively have to do. So the organization and delegation of workers in factories and workshops is a necessary form. It is at the same time the principle of representation of the communist order growing up in the revolution. Production is the basis of society, or, more rightly, it is the contents, the essence of society. Hence, the order of production is at the same time the order of society. Factories are the working units, the cells of which the organism of society consists. The main tasks of these political organs, which mean nothing else but the organs managing the totality of society, concerns the productive work of society. Hence, it goes without saying that the working people in their councils discuss these matters and choose their delegates collected in their production units. We should not believe, though, that parliamentarism, as the political form of capitalism, was not founded on production. Always, the political organization is adapted to the character of production as the basis of society. Representation, according to the dwelling place, belongs to that system of petty capitalist production, where each member is supposed to be the predecessor of his or own small business. Then there is a mutual connection between all these businessmen at one place, dealing with one another, living as neighbors, knowing one another, and therefore sending one common delegate to Parliament. This was the basis of parliamentarism. We have seen that later on this parliamentary delegation system proved to be the right system for representing the growing and changing class of interests within capitalism. At the same time, it is clear now why delegates in Parliament have to take political power into their hands. The political task was only a small part of the task of society. The most important part, the productive work, was the personal task of all the separate producers, the citizens as businessmen. It required nearly all their energy and care. When every individual took care of his own small lot, then society as a totality went right. The general regulations by law, necessary conditions, doubtlessly, but of minor extent, could be left to the care of a special group or trade, the politicians. With communist production, the reverse is not true. Here, the all-important thing, the collective productive work, is the task of society as a whole. It concerns all the workers collectively. Their personal work does not claim their whole energy and care. Their mind is turned to the collective task of society. The general regulation of this collective work cannot be left to the special group or persons. It is the vital interest of the whole working people. There is another difference between parliamentarism and the Soviet system. In parliamentary democracy, one vote is given to every adult man and sometimes woman on the strength of their supreme inborn right of belonging to mankind, as is so beautifully expressed in celebration speeches. In the Soviets, on the other hand, only the workers are represented. Can the council system then be truly democratic if it excludes the other classes of society? The council system embodies the dictatorship of the proletariat. Marx and Engels, more than half a century ago, explained that the social revolution was to lead to the dictatorship of the working class as the next political form, and this was essential in order to bring about the necessary changes in society. Socialists, thinking in terms of parliamentary representation only, tried to excuse or to criticize the violation of democracy and the injustice of arbitrarily excluding persons from the polls because they belonged to certain classes. Now we see how the development of the proletarian class struggle in a natural way produces the organs of this dictatorship, the Soviets. It is certainly no violation of justice that the councils, as the fighting centers of the revolutionary working class, do not include representatives of the opposing class. And thereafter, the matter is not so different. In a rising communist society, there is no place for capitalists. They have to disappear, and they will disappear. Whoever takes part in the collective work is a member of the collectivity and takes part in the decisions. Persons, however, who stand outside the process of collective production are, by the structure of the council system, automatically excluded from influence upon it. Whatever remains of the former exploiters and robbers has no vote in the regulation of production in which they take part. There are other classes in society that do not belong to the two chief opposite classes: small farmers, independent artisans, intellectuals. In the revolutionary fight, they may waver to and fro, but on the whole, they are not very important because they have less fighting power. Mostly their forms of organization and their aims are different. To make friends with them or to neutralize them, if that is possible without impeding the proper aims, or to fight them resolutely if necessary, to decide upon the ways of dealing with them with equity and firmness, will be the concern, often a matter of difficult tactics of the fighting working class. In the production system, insofar as their work is useful and necessary, they will find their place, and they will exert their influence after the principle that whoever does the work has the chief vote in regulating the work. More than half a century ago, Engels said that through proletarian revolution, the state would disappear. Instead of the ruling over men, would come a managing of affairs. This was said at a time when there could not be any clear idea about how the working class would come into power. Now we see this truth of this statement confirmed. In the process of revolution, the old state power will be destroyed, and the organs that take its place, the worker councils, for the time being, will certainly have important political functions, still to repress the remnants of the capitalist power. Their political function of governing, however, will be gradually turned into nothing, but the economic function of managing the collective process of production of goods for the needs of society.